For the last 12 months, we've been deep in this rabbit hole of trying to figure out how we can develop and refine a marketing product better customized from a price perspective and an outcome perspective. And those outcomes are conversions from phone calls and web form completions and things that actually matter, not just how many points your website has moved on Google each month for their keywords, right? Like relevant stuff. Now, it's taken us a while to get here, but man, has it been a hell of a journey and a great one. We now have this product which has been perfectly designed for trade businesses. It is priced well, it's not over the top expensive, and it delivers results, which is the main thing. It's about delivering results. If you're interested in that, if you're spending a lot of money at the moment on marketing that is not delivering an answer, you need to head across to tradiewebguys.com.au, fill in the contact form, reach out to us, and I'll run you through this program. It is amazing, and quite honestly, it's probably going to end up the entire direction this business is going, because the landscape of marketing as we know it has changed so much, and it's super important that you guys understand that and that you stay ahead of the curve. Tradiewebguys.com.au. Enjoy the podcast. The global shortage of skilled labor within the home service trade sector, it's never been more important to stand out from the noise when you're looking to add new team members to your company. And by noise, I'm typically saying, well, how do you differentiate yourself from other people that are fighting for the same eyeballs, the other potential team members? In this podcast, we cover a lot of things, but some of the things that we're going to discuss are how you can go about strategizing, planning, and forecasting what your team looks like in the future, how to design a recruitment process which disqualifies as much as qualifies your candidates, and how to do a better job of telling your story, which then enables you to start attracting the right type of people into your organization. You're also going to hear a whole bunch of other amazing insights and practical things that you can apply to your business in the space of leadership and hiring, recruitment, etc. Enjoy the show. Ken, hi, welcome to the SiteShade podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt.
We've had a few technical issues here and we can't quite get to the bottom of it. We're back now on Zoom, so hopefully this is going to work. For you listeners and viewers out there, Ken's tuning in all the way from Sedona, Arizona. Ken, before we jump in, I just wanted to maybe you could give a bit of an intro to yourself and give us a bit of background as to how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, and not to be confused with Las Vegas, New Mexico. Came to Arizona as a teenager, went to college, worked my way through school in business, majoring in business, and just really fell in love with the whole idea of how businesses function, how they operate, how some do well and some don't, and especially for businesses that seem to have really cracked the code on getting the people component right. So I, started from the ground up, like a lot of people do, worked my way up to corporate executive, and then decided I wanted to have a business where all I helped people do was be really great business people. So 2018, I launched my own executive business coaching practice, and was also able to move up here to Sedona instead of living in Phoenix, where I had to be close to an airport. I live up here and I work from here, and a lot of my clients, we work on Zoom around the world. And then if you happen to live in Arizona, I come to you.
Great. Awesome. And so has this journey taken you into trade businesses like a lot, or is it just one of the verticals that you guys work with?
It was very interesting. It has taken me down the road of working with trades, and specifically when I launched my practice, because I had been in financial services for 20 years, I thought, well, that's probably going to be my natural market.
Right.
That's who's going to want to work with me. And it really became this barbell of people in financial services did want to work with me, but also I happen to be a CrossFitter, and a lot of CrossFit members are tradespeople, and they also wanted to hire me. So I got a lot of entrepreneurs out of my CrossFit world and a lot of execs out of my old financial services world, and that became my whole business.
Wow, there you go. Isn't that funny? You never
Yeah,
do know, do you? That's why I always say to our clients, you just got to get the wheels moving before you can start steering.
exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And I shared with you the first time we met, one of my very first job where I got a paycheck. We're not going to count my paperboy days, but the first job I had where I had a paycheck was working for a friend of the family who owned a contract plumbing business. So, and I started on the ground up in Las Vegas digging ditches because you start with, the groundwork. And then eventually I graduated to top out and finally I got good enough to do some finish work. So
Right.
I have an appreciation and still have some skills, not a ton, but I still have some plumbing skills left. So special place in my heart for tradespeople, and part
Yeah.
of the reason that I still relate. And well, I don't know how it is where you live, but tradespeople are in high demand in small town Sedona and the surrounding towns around us. Boy, if we can get somebody to come to us, we're just delighted. Like we don't,
Mm.
it doesn't even matter the kind of work they do if we can just get them here.
Hmm.
And part of that is just how they're operating. They're running hot. And they're having a hard time finding people so they can keep up with the demand.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's the same anywhere, really. Like there's a global skills shortage from what I can gather.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, especially for project-based work, we've got like some of our builder clients and things like that, renovation clients, so they've just booked out 2 years in advance.
Hmm.
The issue now is, of course, off the back of the whole, the pandemic, is like sourcing the material at a reasonable or even available, scenario. So
Yeah.
it's a funny. I'd love to hear your. I mean, you come from financial services, initially, I suppose, from the professional background, and then you sort of ended up in the trades. And I'd love to see hear what your correlation has been, or your observation, perhaps is a better choice of the word, in relation to how the trade businesses over the last, 5, 10 years or whatever have sort of become more professional in the way they operate. Like I know, back when I did my apprenticeship as a plumber many, many moons ago, it was very much like there was that whole white collar, blue collar sort of mentality where it was like a line in the sand. You're either you're this type of business and you're this type of business. And now, we've got clients around the world that are so insanely professional, and they're so, although technically a blue collar, they're like a white collar business, the way they operate. Like it's so professional, it's so numbers driven, it's so just detailed and orientated. And what's your experience with that?
Yeah, the analogy I'd draw is now trade businesses are so much more similar to what we'd call professional services, the
Mm,
CPAs, the doctors, the lawyers. It's very, very similar,
mm,
and the challenges they have are very, very similar. Uh, Much like a CPA firm, and I do work with some of those type of firms as well. They're challenged with some of the same thing that tradespeople are, in the sense that they're really good at their craft, their specialty.
yeah,
They are the experts, and that is different than the actual operation of the business. And I think what we see is, companies like here, Ace Hardware now has franchises, so a tradesperson can set up
mm.
a trade under the Ace umbrella. And that wasn't around 10, 20 years ago that I ever saw.
Mm,
So you're right. I think tradespeople are figuring out exactly what the professional services figured out, that if they can get the operations right, they already have their expertise. They get the operations right, and it's a highly lucrative business. I'd say it's from supply demand. People are much more eager. If I have the name and number of a good, reliable plumber, that's going to be more valuable than if I have the name of a lawyer, because those are
sure,
just easier to find.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, I just noticed it was interesting because all of a sudden, I'm having conversations with, trade businesses that are, being purchased by accountants. or being purchased by, someone that had no experience within the trades, so that, because essentially they knew how to run a business. And it just sort of made me realize that like a well-run business is a well-run business. And the missing link is very often not how good you are at swinging the hammer. It's how good you are at running the business. And sure, and I suppose it's, the reason why this podcast exists in the first place. It's to help people understand that if, you could be the best at what you do from a skills perspective, but like in order to run a business, it's a different set of skills. And we're kind of preaching to the choir. People listening to this know that. But yeah, I just found it really interesting when you've got, like I'm talking with guys that are, in private equity that are buying trade businesses. And I'm like, interesting,
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, they
They
don't go
understand the value.
exactly right. Yeah. So, yeah, I think, like credit to what you were saying before, the whole operational structure and how your business, how you guys out there decide how to run and deploy process within your organization, is often like, don't for a second think it's not a valuable thing. Like it might seem like it takes a lot of time to set that stuff up, and in truth it does, but it's like you're building value into your business every step of the way.
Exactly. People, they're busy.
Mm,
Is first thing people say is, I don't know if I have enough time to stop long enough to write things down, to plot this out, to strategize.
yeah.
And the reality is you don't have time not to.
Yeah.
That that stopping long enough to work on the business,
Mhm.
to develop your own processes, the things you do well, to really call attention to what are the core values that you care about, so that when you go to hire, you're not just hiring somebody that knows how to do the thing that you want done, whether that's scheduling or a fellow tradesperson, but you want to make sure they fit in, that
Mhm.
they belong. So, so you start with the core values piece is really the first component of hiring. And then we get into the rest of it. Because if they don't match core values, it really doesn't matter how good a trade that they can perform.
Mm.
At some point, there's just going to be weird friction. And you may not put your finger on it, but I almost guarantee if they're good at what they do, but it doesn't feel right, there's a core values mismatch in there.
Yeah, it's a tricky like it's one of those. I had this conversation recently with another with a lady actually, who was sort of in a similar space, and we are talking about you know businesses will have their mission statement and their vision statement and their core values. Quite honestly, like I feel like I'm kind of falling into this trap myself at the moment. So we're sort of redesigning a lot of this stuff and trying to get the team on board with what that vision and mission and values are, so that it's not just something that lives in in our wiki. It's something that we actually live and breathe. And it's like, no, dude, this is why we do this. And this is our combined mission, and this is the vision that we're working towards. And like getting people to buy into that is like, it's so important for culture.
Mhm.
And I also think it's one of the easiest things to drop the ball on, because you just get caught up in the doing and you forget about that stuff sometimes. And um, like that, keeping that cadence and keeping that training and keeping that front present with your team members is like, from my experience, the sort of the missing piece.
Yeah, well, you said it. You get so busy in the business, uh, especially when you're shorthanded and you find
Mhm.
somebody that you know can do the job. So you hire them and you forget that you didn't really test them yet to see if they match the core value, right? You didn't have a conversation with them to find out if they think something's important. And some of the early work I did in coaching, we had that come up where, for example, one of my clients, they'd hired this, there was a marketing agency that hired a phenomenal marketer. He'd had extreme experience, really seemed like the right person. And
I know where this is going.
you know where it's going, but there's this constant friction. And it's because one of their core values is family. We are a family. We spend so much time together that we are going to care about one another and care about each other's success in a way that may not be the norm in other places. And when we finally got to the core values work, this fella declared that BS.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, it was obvious why he was having such a hard time fitting in,
It,
because he didn't see himself as part of that family, and that's why there was just constant friction. So they parted ways, and it's okay. He's actually very happy and very successful somewhere else, where being a family at work is not part of the deal, and that's better for him.
we've seen it a lot over the years with, I mean, especially as, as businesses grow and they develop and they start to, they have to change. You're forced into change. Like you can't expect to be where you are, where you want to go, without making changes from where you are today, like, and anyway, as part of that journey, very often we'll see scenarios where I could honestly, I could rattle off 10 cases with clients we've worked with over the years where they've had like the most experienced roofer, installer, plumber, electrician, whatever it might be in the whole team, been doing it for 1,000 years, and they just don't fit in with the values of the business in the space of, well, this is the way that we're going to do this from now on, because they're very often stuck in their ways,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like trying to teach an old dog new tricks kind of thing. And like I've seen it over and over again, like these most experienced people in the team have had to be let go because they just don't fit the mold of like what that company needs in order to get them to the next stage in the business. And for you guys out there, like it's probably hitting home to a lot of you. Like I can tell you right now, the guy that can swing the hammer the best, or lay drainage the best, whatever it is, he may be the bottleneck in the business at the moment. He may be the one dragging culture down. He may be the one, preventing the vision and the mission and the values actually hitting home, because he's blocking it and he's calling it BS, and everyone listens and respects him because he's been there for the longest, and blah 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 blah. So I suppose
Yeah.
as business owners and as leaders, these are the conversations we have to face and we have to address regularly if we have any intention of ever taking it to the next point.
Yeah, and somewhere I bet if they've got a problem child on team right now, they have a spidey sense that's what the problem is. They know,
Mm.
but there's that sense of oh well, they've been with me from the beginning, or they've been with me for quite a few years, where others have come and gone. But to your point, they're probably you're going to get addition by subtraction. Get that person out of the way. That's your bottleneck, and you're going to be shocked at how well you do. And we all have plenty of examples of, you get rid of the one problem child, and all of a sudden you may not even need to rehire because everybody else is so much more productive, so much more successful, so much happier. That was, people were bummed to come to work because one person was just complaining all the time. And I'll tell you the other thing that I think COVID did, because I've heard people tell me that it really forced a lot of businesses to be, for lack of a less overused word, innovative.
Mm.
Right? Your customers wanted to do business a different way, so you had a choice, right? You could take here in the U.S., the Small Business Administration was giving out lots of money and loans and everything else. Some businesses used it to pivot, innovate, change some things so that they could stay in business, and they did. Others used it to just prolong the way they were already doing business and made no adjustment, and now they're out of business. So, I think COVID probably accelerated both success and failure for a great many businesses based on how they were operating.
There is absolutely no question that is exactly I mean, and we've seen it before. I've spoken about it on the show before. We've seen global crises, we've seen financial crises, now we've seen pandemics. Like, sure, the semantics are a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's the businesses that have applied themselves to adapt and change that are the ones that have come through the other end, with flags flying. And it will never. This is a metaphor for business in general. Like, there's always things that we recently have just completely redesigned our entire, from our agency, Tradie Web Guys. Like, we just completely designed the entire service and offering completely from ground up. Bang, just redone everything, because we know that it's not the same as it was 5 years ago. Like things are moving, especially when you're in the marketing space, and like things just change all the time. And if you're not constantly evolving, and you're not like adapting your business, and this as well, I suppose, is the advantage of having a small business. You can make these pivots. You don't have as much red tape. Like I've worked with big businesses in the past. By big, I mean like, companies that have layers and layers of management, and like for you to update the website, you've got to go through 10 people. Like it's a freaking nightmare, like
Yep.
the advantage of being a small business is you can just be agile and you can make these pivots and changes as you need to. And I'm not saying go out there like with, half cocked. And I'm just saying like you can make these changes faster based on like feedback and things that you're getting, from customers and from the market, things that are happening out there.
Exactly, exactly. And here in our little small town, the businesses that are thriving are usually smaller businesses that are locally owned, where some of these chains have really struggled to accommodate this geography.
You
You
know
know,
what a
this
really, really interesting dynamic is? I don't know if you've had any experience with this, Ken, but like the when I sort of started the agency like 12 years ago or something like that, there was this whole um conception that businesses wanted to appear much bigger than they were. And and it was like, no, no, we don't want to put like our faces on the website because we want to appear like we're a company that has 100 staff. And I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. And 5 years later, and now what we're seeing is, especially in the wake of COVID, where like people have barriers up and they have like these, um, I suppose, they have these, barricades up in the space of, well, who am I letting into my house? Who is this person? And all of a sudden, the dynamic has gone from, I want to appear like I'm this huge business, to now all these huge businesses that are trying to appear like they're smaller businesses. And there's faces on the website, and this is our meet the team bio, and this is Tony. He's coming to your house he'll be there within the hour. Here's a little bit about him. And like that whole conversation has sort of gone back now towards like being a small business, building trust and rapport, being likable, like putting a face to the business. And I just think it's so amusing today when you see businesses that are still trying to do it the old way.
Yeah, there's much more of a appreciation for personalizing, for being local, for knowing who someone is, for being referred by somebody else, much more so. And even those of us who live local, but sometimes we go to like a chain grocery store, those are still all of our neighbors that work there, and we still know all of them. But they're trapped with the corporate giant who insists they do certain things that make no sense for this small town.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And that whole, I mean, again, you guys are so lucky being in a position where you don't have to succumb to that crap, like you can cut through that shit and just completely disregard it. But like it's really, I suppose, the power that you guys have is through like observation and feedback and actually making data driven changes. And I mean, we're in the marketing game, right? Like everything we do now is data driven, it's numbers driven. Like we want to test things, see if it works, and then move on to the next test, And so, and I encourage businesses to do that at every level, whether it's operations or whether it's hiring or whatever it might be. Like just you've always got to be testing new things, which is essentially why we're always evolving. Like there's always some sort of evolution happening there. You're green and growing, or you're ripe and rotting. You're always moving in some direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the best successes we've had is we're constantly everything that we put out to the public, we A/B tested
Right.
for which eyeballs we're trying to get in front of. And when it works, we double down on that one. So it always reminds me of going to get my eyes checked, A or B, which one's better? Well, A, great. And then we go to the next version, and then is it one or two? And we continue to test. But to your point about being able to quickly innovate, I'm sure your listeners do the same thing of, the great part about owning your own business, about being a small business owner, is that I can accommodate. So, do I have a standard ways of working with people? Sure, I have to have a starting point for a conversation, but the great thing is I can customize as the client needs something different, more or less. That's the best part about it. And I'm sure listeners do the same thing of I have a starting menu and then I customize from there. Big companies struggle to do that, right? It's you have to, whatever they have on the shelf is what they sell and that's it. You're
Yeah.
not going to be able to customize it your way.
Yeah. It's the difference between like presenting problems to a solution or presenting a product or a service. In complete transparency, we were in that trap for a long time, where we would sell, this is SEO, this is a website, this is Google Ads, but none of them were really necessarily like focusing on the outcome, whereas
Right.
like now the service, the offering is way different because it's like, well, no, we will guarantee you this outcome. This is what we're working towards. It's this outcome. It's this many leads a month. It's this many qualified conversations or whatever it is. Whatever the means is to get there, whatever. That no one cares. Like, no one cares if it's like through SEO or Google Ads or Facebook. No one gives a shit. They just want the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with trade businesses we're offering here. It's like, well, what are you really offering here? Like, yeah, you do home renovations, but like that's not the outcome. The outcome, like, is the transformation in the place where people are going to grow and raise their children and like all this kind of stuff. Like the messaging behind that is what really can make you help you stand out against your competitors.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's funny, I just got off a call with, like, just before this one, actually, with a client of ours over in Kansas. Shout out to Mike. He's a really awesome operator. And like he was just saying to me, like, I've just been listening to all this stuff for so many years about how like, customers don't care about you. They just care about them and blah, 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 blah. And then he heard me on a podcast, which I did with some colleagues of mine over in North America. And I was saying, well, no, it's quite the opposite, actually. Like, don't for a second think that your customers aren't extremely interested in what you do. Like, they want to know your story. They want to know who you are. They want to know like why you do what you do, who you do it for, where you do it. Like, they're coming to you for a service, sure, but like they want to know about you. They want to know, like, and trust you. They want to. You can't hide. You can't build that trust and rapport if you're hiding behind like just this templated bullshit that you see all across websites today, and the whole, like, the permission to play bullshit that you see. We're trustworthy and responsive and we offer great service. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, if you're not doing that, you shouldn't be in business,
Yeah.
like. So
Yeah.
it's this interesting segue now where I think businesses are starting to realize, well, like, telling our story is actually can be our advantage. And like, this is going to tie heavily into, I suppose, the conversation that we're going to have around like finding the right team members. It's really like, if you're not like being transparent with who you are, what your objectives are, what your mission is, what your values are, like, you are going to hire a dud over and over again. Like this, you've got to be willing to tell your story and be transparent and put your face onto something so that people can become part of, what they believe is true, and they want to be part of that team.
Exactly. Exactly. And I feel like this, it's one of those, I mean, I think great leadership is like great parenting. There's an unconditional element to it. There's a commitment level to it. And there's, again, a word we all use, but it really does mean something of if you can be really authentic
Mm.
in your story and your passion and your purpose, it's going to resonate. It's going to resonate with the kind of people you want to do business with. And it's also going to resonate with the people that want to come be part of your team. That's the most important part. That's why telling the story is so important.
Sure. And like, there's literally no question whatsoever that recruitment is a marketing exercise. Like, you're trying to put your message and you're trying to find people that hundreds, potentially thousands of other businesses are out there trying to find as well. So like, don't think for a second recruitment is not straight up a marketing exercise.
Yeah, I think it is the yin and yang, recruiting to prospecting customers, however you do that. Those are it's two processes that that are very, very similar. They're related, and they are processes. So they're not a start finish,
Hmm.
right? We don't start looking for a customer once we've completed another project, job, or um,
Yeah.
uh, situation. That's not the day that we start looking for the next customer. That's an all the time thing. Well, the same has to be said of recruiting. We're always keeping an eye out for people that want to be part of our team, that have a skill we do or might need to add in the future, and keep that Rolodex. Keep them stay interested. Keep them warm.
Hmm.
There may be for some, you may be really good at knowing who's available in the community, and if you don't need someone, maybe one of your peer businesses does, and you can be the referral source of that,
Hmm.
right? And to your point, you want to be in a conversation so that you can really uncover who they are, what their values are, is there a match, and then obviously if they have the skill based on their past experience that you want to add to your company.
It's been a really interesting journey for us with like recruitment and HR and things like that, because like I mean, for years we did it terribly. We would just hire based on when we needed someone, and we'd hire a complete dud and fire them and then blame them for not being the right team member, when the reality was it was the process that let them down and us down. And now the way that we recruit, it's so long, and it's so much about getting to know the person through various steps of a process, to the point where at the end you can comfortably offer them a position or whatever it might be. But I mean, I can see how it would be frustrating for somebody who's out there actively looking for a job if they don't understand that dynamic. I get it, because
Mm.
like it's taken like our hiring process from when can you start to basically, well, welcome into our recruitment pipeline, and this is the stages that you're going to go through, and these are the 4 interviews you're going to have, and these are why we do it, and this is why we need you to fill out a personality profile and all this. Like, and I get it, like you're making people jump through hoops, and it might be annoying for them if they're like just really screaming for a job, but like the point is, at the end of the day, you're hiring someone that's the best fit for the business, and that you're the best fit for them.
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
don't know
you're
how
not
I don't know
hiring.
how you rush that. I don't know how you do that any quicker.
No. But that's a fit thing too. If there are, there are companies, there are organizations that they don't they don't have any of those hoops. They also have higher turnover. They just work that into part of that is their process. I think we have this a chain of gyms called Planet Fitness, and it's, I don't know, $10 a month. Well, their whole premise is you're not going to come,
Mm.
or a certain collection of people aren't going to show up, but it's so cheap that they'll keep the membership but never show up. In fact, I've been told their facilities, if all the members showed up who are members, they don't have enough, they don't have the capacity for it.
Sure.
So it's just part of their it's part of their business enterprise. That's their plan. That's how they do business. And some businesses also do business by turning over people very quickly, making it very easy to start. But it also makes it very easy for them to go too. I mean, they weren't that invested in getting the job, and so they're not that invested in staying at the job.
I think
So
I
I
think
know
when
that.
you
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead, finish.
So I think what we're saying is everything about how we hire, we're demonstrating and drawing in the kind of people that will stay with us, that will find that it's worth it to go through the process because they're going to be there for the long term.
I mean, look, there's no real perfect formula. I'm not saying there is, but I just know from our experience. I mean, very recently, actually, like a couple of months back, we had someone that was going through through our recruitment process, and I don't know how they got to it, to be honest with you, but they did. They got to like the final interview, and there was maybe 3 or 4 candidates within that final interview, and it had taken probably a month at that point. And the message went out to that person. They weren't selected because they didn't have the level of experience that we wanted for that specific role. And so we reach out to them and say, hey, listen, this position's gone to someone else based on these parameters. They had a bit more experience in these areas, blah, blah, blah. So this person then went around and went and left us this terrible Google review.
Mm.
And I was like, I actually got a podcast coming out and some training coming out of this guy. So check this out, because this is the podcast about how you handle negative reviews. It's really, really useful. And I thought this is a prime example of exactly why we have this process in place, because we very nearly, even with a process, made the mistake of hiring this dickhead. And that conversation was when we went through and I looked at the review and I read through it, and it was and then I went and looked into their profile, looked at all the other reviews they'd made, and they'd made review after review after review of companies they'd worked for, bad reviews, just slamming them. And I was like, man, we dodged a bullet here. Like, they were just, it was a bad candidate. And so anyway,
Yeah.
long story short, I put together this a great response to their post, and I did screenshots with URL tags and a Loom video and all this stuff, because I basically said, well, you know, at the end of the day, I highlighted them. We're not here to hire everybody. Like, we're not looking for everyone. We're looking for a select few. We have this process in place so that we can refine and we can make sure that we do get the right people. And this is a prime example of how this process has worked, because it's eliminated you at the last minute, and then you've gone and left this review. And by the way, then how these screenshots of these other reviews they've left and all this kind of stuff. Of course, they pulled the review. I knew they would. They pulled the review down within an hour of me sending the email. But like, what they don't know is that I've got it all documented and I'm going to use it in content creation material. So thank you for leaving that review, guys, because you've just added a great podcast and training for my community.
Yeah. That's going to be a fantastic podcast because I know a lot of people, a lot of business owners get very, very worried about that exact thing happening and then hurting their business.
I mean, it's how you handle the objection, you know, in most
Yep.
cases. And like, people think having a negative review is a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing, because people will go and read reviews, especially if you got like all these fives and then one. Like, I'm always interested in what the one is, because the one is always typically from some idiot who has a habit out of leaving 1-star reviews when they don't get their way. It's pretty
Yes.
much, it's almost a prophecy. Like, and if you doubt me, go and check your own. I bet you've got, like, you guys out there, I bet there's a handful of people that have left you really bad reviews. And if you go and check all their reviews, you click on their profile, I can almost guarantee they're all the same. And that's the best way to handle that objection. Just take, you just take URL screenshots, you craft a nice response, and I'm going to put all this into training. But then you basically say, hey, just drop it in there. Like, they'll have that review down in minutes because they just look so stupid. But anyway, we're not
Yep.
talking. So
Yeah.
in relation to the whole, finding the right, team members in this climate, like, we're in a climate here where there's a global shortage on skilled trades. There's a global shortage on, I suppose what you might want to call a qualified candidates or whatever. Like, what does the process look like? How do you find these people? How do you stand out?
Yeah. Well, how do you find them is first I like to say you mimic the best person you've already got. What is it that makes them the best person that you've already got?
Like profiling?
Well, I'm sorry.
Like profiling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, beyond profiling, first it's, John. John is our best employee. Well, what makes John the very best employee? Well, he does these things. Well, what is it about those things that are so awesome? And you start to unpack and you figure out John has a set of behaviors that are exactly tied to your core values. That's why everyone likes him. It's why you want to clone him. And then you start to build your candidate pool off those elements. And then, yeah, there's going to be some profiling. Okay, well, what tools are we going to use? How are we going to interview somebody to figure out if they've got these specific characteristics, and you design it out? Does that sound like a lot of work? Yes. And it'll pay for itself if you can avoid hiring the person that gives you the terrible review because you didn't hire them. Because you always know in interviews, it's not just the answers to the questions, it's how they answer the questions. It's where they may have shown some frustration. And then you're going to have a sense for who is the right fit and who isn't. And look, you're not going to bat 1,000. You're just not. Nobody does. Nobody can. But if you put together a thoughtful process about how you're going to find really good people to staff up your business, if you get it 80% right, that is far better than a great many of your competitors. Going all the way back to some of the first part of our conversation, this is part of really good operations, is having really good people. Having really good people is a really good process for finding those really good people that fit in, to know exactly who you're hiring and why you're hiring them. That intention will pay huge dividends. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than fog a mirror, uh, swing the hammer, and then when they don't work out, just start over.
And interestingly, not surprisingly, but interestingly, I suppose the feedback we get from team members that we do bring on board is always, I've never seen an experience. I've never had a hiring experience like that. Like they've never it's never been to that detail. Which I think is great. And like in complete fairness, it's probably more of a disqualification process based on the fact that you are really looking for people to fall out along the way. I say this to clients too, when we put like clients, through similar sort of systems. The guy that you get to the second interview and then he ends up going to work for your competitor, that means your process has probably done the job.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Absolutely.
so
You
like
can't
people
say
go,
that. You
God
can't
damn
say
it,
that enough.
I just spent all this time building this thing out, and it's taken this long, and as a result, this candidate's gone to the next guy. I'm like, so the process has done its job because they're not the right fit. Why didn't they go to the next stage? It's a simple process. They just didn't want to answer these questions. That means it's done
Yeah.
its job. Like, have faith in that process, like we'll see what happens with that employee with that other company.
Yeah. Trust the process. You can't reiterate that too many times,
Mm.
which is, it's sort of like, uh, if you're doing your analysis on your website and they go to your services and then they go to your price page, and there's a funnel: services, and then fewer go to the price page, and then fewer still schedule with you. Then your website's doing its job. It's filtering through. If they don't want to pay your price, or if that's a major issue for them that they don't even want to talk to you, that's okay. It's gotten some people that aren't interested in you out of the way.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's one conversation that you won't have to have because your process has done the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting dynamic as well when you look at how um, the like even beyond like when people go through your process, their willingness and their eagerness to onboard properly and to ask questions and like it just you can really see it like how that profile and how that whole early stages of that process comes into play once they're onboarded because there's just it's just a different level of conversation.
Mhm. Exactly. It's um, if you're a company that has a process for doing really great work, then your hiring process is reflective of that. And if somebody wants to shortcut there, they're going to shortcut if you hire them. However they show up in the interview process is exactly what you're going to get more often than not. That's how they play the game of life. How they do one thing is how they do everything. Now, are there times where you think, my gosh, that was like the best interview I've ever conducted with somebody, and they're phenomenal and they're a 10. I can't wait to get them here. And then you realize they peaked in the interview. It
Mm,
does happen,
sure.
right? It does happen.
I mean, that's always the that's people, isn't it? Like I think that's why you need to make the process longer and harder because it's harder for people to fake it on like over and over again, you know. Whereas
Yeah,
if it's one interview, like anyone can bullshit their way through an interview. Anyone can like give your phone number to their mate and say you're their reference, like
sure, sure.
so
I mean, I suppose that, and it's according to how complex the role is going to be, how long are they going to be with your company, how easy, if you will, how easy is the role to fill. You don't want a super long process for somebody that's going to do cleaning and maintenance 2 nights a week. But if it's going to be somebody that's going to be interacting with all of your customers, you want to get the right person.
Sure. I mean, look, we could talk for hours on this, that whole concept of like, one thing I will say, and this is, we've covered on this a number of times in different various podcasts with, Al Levy and all these awesome, educators. Like, when you're hiring somebody to come in, like hiring somebody for a job is very different. It's a different conversation than if you were hiring somebody for a career. And the difference there being, like if your competitor's hiring for the same position and they're $5 an hour, paying them an extra $5 an hour, then they'll go for that. Whereas if you're hiring somebody because you want them to be part of a culture and you want them to buy into your vision and your mission, and they can understand, sure, maybe I'm only going to be getting paid at this much at this point, but this is my career path. If I can do this, this, and this, then I'll be in this position. If I can do that, that, and that, then that'll lead to this position, and blah, 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 blah. Like, that's a very different conversation, because it's not, at that point, it's not about the money. It's about, well, where can I potentially end up in this as a career?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's it's a very, and then a lot of businesses give us the feedback, well, how am I going to do that? Like, I'm just a plumber. Like, I need someone that can, like, where are they going to progress to? And in most cases, for better or worse, they're right. And by that, I mean, where are they going to progress to? You don't even know yourself. Like, there's no vision on the business. There's no like calculated, goals set to say, well, we want to get here. These are the steps that we're going to take to do this. And as this happens, this is how the career path and the org chart is going to develop in order to, to make that a reality. Most businesses don't have that mapped out, which is why, that conversation is almost nearly always void.
Exactly. And if it's a story, only the founder knows, like it's the origin story they tell around the campfire. The sooner they can get it out and on paper and just part of the collective,
Mm.
the better, the more success they're going to have. To your point of that builds the vision, right? If I'm the founder and I tell my story to everybody I hire, and then they tell the story to the other people that come into the company, that's the fabric,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's something they can get behind, something they can believe in, something they can stick with. But yeah, I mean, if the founder wants people to stick around as they build their vision, then they have to know what their vision is.
It's interesting. Like, I just recently, like this last week, did a podcast with Mike from CEO Warrior, and he's coming back to do another podcast. Because in that episode, he talked about how, we touched briefly by chance on the topic of transparency, and I said, "Ooh, hang on, before we go any further, let's throw this one out to the audience. Who would like to talk more about why it's important to be transparent with your team members and technicians in relation to things like pricing and how they can," because this is the thing, like, as business owners, we have this, for right or wrong, and I'm starting to think, the latter at the moment, like, why should team members know about the financials of the business? And you're right, if they don't understand how the business runs and how money is actually made, like in the overall business, then they will always have this mindset of thinking, well, the boss is just taking all this money himself and I'm getting paid a small fee. They don't really understand it. But like, if you can educate them to say, well, let's talk about like how much the costs that are involved in running your truck. So you go, so we're charging you out at the moment like $400 an hour or whatever it is when we go to a block drain. Let's break that down. What does it cost to run a truck? And this is the exercise we're going to be going through with Mike in an upcoming podcast, where we're going to do that. We're going to break it down. So, and then they go through this with the team, and they say, right, if we're going to become a $10 million company, like, this is what that looks like, and this is why you need to understand that this isn't about like the boss making $10 million. This is about, in order for the business to get to this point, you need to reverse engineer it down to the truck level, down to you as the guy doing the work. This is why we have KPIs. This is why it's important to do this. And like just helping them understand that it's because you get charged out this much and you get paid this much. There's a huge amount of operating expenses that come into that dynamic and into that conversation in order to get to that next stage. Like people need to understand that with transparency. Otherwise, they just think you're fleecing them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's plenty of examples in business, old and modern, of the more transparent everybody is about the finances of the business, the better the business actually does. The grocery store that I referred to, that I worked with, that I learned business in, that I worked my way through school in, was all about transparency. And that is why back then they not only made 6 times the average profit, their next competitor had 3 times the stores and not nearly as much profit, because every person in the store had a number. We all knew how we made profit. And from the kid that bagged groceries to the store manager, everyone understood their part in the success of the business.
Oh, wow.
Right? The importance of, hey, if you think stopping at a convenience store is no big deal, multiply that times 150 employees times this many times you stop, and that's what it means to the store. They used to break it down in really straightforward terms, depending on who they're talking to, and everyone understood, and it led to huge success for all the years they operated in that mode. And there's books written about transparency and showing all of your team members their contributions. So I'm a huge fan of that transparency, and the reason is that's an empowering component of, if you know what contributes to your success, then you can make better decisions.
Now I love that. Yeah, that's that. What you just said there about everyone in the business having a number. That is
Mm-hmm.
something that I've been trying so desperately to deploy within our own business, like making people accountable to one thing, because it just becomes this game of pass the buck if people know that if they're not accountable to something specific and if they don't have a number to represent, Um, very interesting. Probably a whole new different podcast, to be honest. But man, this has been great. I mean, I feel like we could just talk for days on this topic. There's so many little like avenues and segues we could take, which all lead back to the greater picture of, well, how do you find and retain the team members? But I think from my point of view, and like I'll definitely like to hear your key points. Like mine are always going to be like, make sure you have a process. Well, first of all, make sure you have a bigger picture so you know what you're hiring for and why you're hiring for. Have a process in place which helps disqualify people along the journey to the qualified ones, and make it hard, and don't be apologetic for it. Like, just, it is what it is. And if the dead wood falls out as a result of that, that's the whole point. It's to make the dead wood fall out. And then beyond that, and probably something that I know I certainly probably need to put more attention into doing, is like that whole conversation around like retention and training, empowerment, and making sure that, the team members that you do have on board want to stay, and they're trained and they feel like they're moving in the right direction. And there's a good culture happening in there. It's a pretty good formula at my end. What have I missed?
Yeah, the one thing that I would add that I think can trip people up is having that false notion of how long someone's going to be here, right? So, they want to hire, for example, I want to hire somebody young because I really want them to stay with me for a long time. Well, those two things might not go together. Younger people switch jobs more often than my generation did or has. So it's, control what you can control. You listed a lot of them. Know who you're looking for. Know that your process screens. Be comfortable with that screen. But the other part that I'd say is understand they're going to stay as long as they want to, and you create the environment for them to be successful there. So to your point about make sure that the retention piece, create the environment so that they want to stay. Just understand they can come in on any given day and leave. So make it a
Is it?
place they want to stay.
It's really funny you say that because, like, I look back to the place that I did my apprenticeship in, back in 1999 or whatever, and it was a great company. I loved being there, but I was getting into my fourth year of my apprenticeship, and after that, I wanted to go traveling, and the boss was like, "Well, no, I don't want you to go traveling. I want you to stay at work." Oh, well, I'm 21 years old or whatever. Like, I'm going to go traveling. And this is what, and so we had the option back then where you could do your certificate 4, which is essentially the course that you do within your trades to get your license, and you could do it in 1 year, and it was like 1 day a week, or you could do it for 2 years for 2 nights a week. And I said, well, I'm going to do it 1 day a week because I want to go traveling with you. And he said, well, no, you can do it 2 nights a year because I don't want you to go traveling. And look, because he wouldn't like budge on that, I quit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure to this day he probably still resents me for it. But like the reality was, if he had the company that I went to off the back of that, I was from the beginning. I said, listen, this is the deal. I'm doing this Cert 4 training, the licensing training, 1 day a week. Next year I want to go traveling for a while. I don't know how long that'll be. And the guy's like, okay, cool, we'll go do that. And then if you come back and you want to come work for us too, and I did, and I came back and I worked for them for years. And like, that whole conversation was just because he was so stuck in his ways, and it was all me,
Yep.
me. And as a result, I mean, who knows? Like maybe, God, heaven forbid, maybe he would even still be there.
Yeah. Yeah. If you go with rigid versus flexible, you're just not going to get as many good people.
So you kind of got to, you do have to meet. I think that's why that process is good. Like when you're hiring, when you're going through that exercise, you should always try and figure out what it is that they want, and then help them map out a route to that through working with you.
Absolutely.
It's not
Yep.
always money.
No. Mm-mm. Absolutely not. Yeah. Money's not a motivator, it's a satisfier. So
Right.
you just have to meet the basic, and then there's all the other stuff.
Cool, Ken, let's wrap this up. We could be talking for days on this, and I would love to, but I know you've got stuff to do and I've got stuff to do. So you've left a link here to your ebook, 6 Silver Bullets. Tell me about that.
Yeah, 6 silver bullets you need to grow any business fast. It's a 23-minute read, lots of thoughts and ideas and templates for you to use. Just tackles the mistakes that a lot of business people can make. So it's a great starting place, and it's written in my voice, so it'll either resonate or it won't. But you'll know a lot about how I work with business people just by reading the free ebook.
Mate, thanks so much for that. For you listeners out there, it'll be in the show notes. So head across to the siteshed.com and you'll just search Ken, and you'll be able to get access
All right.
to that.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Mate, I really appreciate the time, and hopefully look forward to chatting to you in an upcoming episode about something. Guys, if you have any feedback or any questions, or if you wanted us to expand on anything in particular and things we might have mentioned in that previous episode, just let me know. Send me a DM on Facebook, reply to the email, comment on one of the Facebook or posts or wherever you see this come through. And I'm sure I could twist Ken's arm and get back on and dive a little bit deeper into some of these things if
Very
we need
good.
to.
Yeah.
Ken, thanks so much, mate. That is a wrap. Big shout out to Ken for coming on the show and sharing his wisdom with us on this topic. It's a topic that never ever gets old. There's always something new to be adding to the conversation around how to find the right team members and how to become a better leader. So thank you again, Ken. To get notified of upcoming videos, hit subscribe and turn on your notifications. Please, while you're there, be sure to share this video with someone else, tag me in the comments and leave some comments. I'd love to hear what your feedback is on the things that we discussed in that show.